All right, gentlemen, we are now live. I'm glad to see both of you this evening.
Absolutely.
I like the horse right above your head, Brad.
Yeah, it's not my horse or my painting. I'm living at the Residence Inn, so I've got the one-bedroom studio, and we've got two rambunctious kiddos in there. And I thought maybe that might be best for everyone. I'm sure you two dads could relate.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I can appreciate that. Well, if you folks are
If
just
we ever
tuning in
did
here,
these deals like 30 minutes before this, I
oh
tell you, I'd
man,
have a sidekick right on my lap.
yeah,
I've told you 100 times.
oh yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. All right, folks, if you're just now joining us, this is Nathan Day alongside Brandon Yanis and Brad Mabry. And normally what we do, we ask people to type in the chat there where they're watching from. It's always fun to see whoever's tuning in and checking us out and where they're watching from. So appreciate everybody tuning in here, and we're poised to have a really good conversation. And so we're going to have lots of back and forth, and we want folks to bring over a lot of questions down in the chat that we can then pull up and show live onto the screen. So we got all kinds of folks watching from Iowa down to Florida, Ohio, Chillicothe, downwind from the paper mill. Brad.
There you go. I'm still learning our technology here.
Hey, well, we can see you and we can hear you, and you look beautiful.
Okay,
so that's really what matters the most.
Top priority.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always wait just a few minutes to let folks get tuned in and join on. So we got Heather in Nebraska watching. We got Rebecca in Mississippi, Josh in Texas, Ryan in Oklahoma, Ellen in Southern Ohio, KD in Gainesville. We got Bethlehem, Georgia. Hope he's smoking something good tonight for us, Colby. Christine in Dothan, and Wyoming, Louisiana. Always blows my mind, man, how many people we reach on these things. Northeast Oklahoma, Terre Haute, Indiana, Southwest Missouri. Appreciate everybody tuning in. This is going to be really good. We appreciate everybody watching. So we also have in the chat our fellow Sunglo teammate. We've got Kim Lewis. That's going to be kind of answering some questions there as you might type them in the chat. And she's going to do a couple over some answering over there, but then we're going to answer some up in the chat too when we think they're relevant for everybody to see. So Dave in Minnesota, appreciate you tuning in. Tyler, I'm glad you can spell Ohio. That's good. You guys practice that a lot over there, that OHIO stuff. So I'm glad you guys can know how to spell your state. You got Shelly in Texas, Wisconsin, Ohio. Man, we got all kinds of places watching tonight. This is awesome. This is great. So we're well over 100 people tuning in. And if you could also hit that share button so we can get this out to as many people as possible. So our goal tonight is for us to be as informative and as engaging as we possibly can with you. There's always work participation. So don't feel like you can't ask us questions. We're open books. We want to make sure that you have the best experience that you can. So we're about 6 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and kind of get rolling here. Again, my name is Nathan Day on the Sunglo team, as well as Brad Mabry with a horse right above him, living in the hotel at the moment. And then we've got Brandon Yanis that's joining us as well. So it's going to be us three tonight, and it's going to be a really good evening. So we're really our main focus for tonight is talking about 30 days out and where you need to your show pig 30 days out. And we know that we got tons of shows coming up. We got our majors that are getting ready to start rolling down south and really all over the country. I mean, we've got folks that are 30 days out from their target shows in a lot of situations. So, and don't think that this is just totally something that needs to be used on January 13th. This is some information that can be used any time of the year whenever you're 30 days out from that target show. And we're going to be talking about kind of some of the most frequently asked questions that we're getting asked this time of year, that we're getting asked for folks that are 30 days out on their show pigs. So we're going to focus solely on pigs tonight. And I think we're going to be able to dive kind of right in. So really the first one that we get asked the most, and Brandon and Brad will get asked this a lot more than I do, since they're the actual rep for the feed. We get asked, my pig is too heavy, right? Or folks they call up and they say, Brandon, what's the question that you get asked the most right now in terms of weight?
It's usually not a question. It's usually panic mode and some kind of rescue situation, typically where, a standard deal, and honestly, it's very frustrating to get, but it's the standard deal is I'm 2 weeks out from show and I literally have 5 pounds to go to hit my maximum weight limit. What do I do and still make them look right? And honestly, it's challenging when you do that. And I would say more times than not, and I know it's not always easy because not everybody always has a set of scales at home to be able to take care of things. But there are different ways that you can get things accomplished. But I always tell people the earlier you weigh and more often, it just gives you an opportunity to set the pace on what's going on rather than trying to play catch up when you're already behind the 8 ball. So, there's a lot of things when you get really close. You can do a lot of stuff 30 days out, slow one down or to speed one up. But when you get that last week or 10 days and you need a whole bunch of weight, or you need to really stop and sit down and to look perfect while doing that, it's a little more challenging to do. And so that tends to be some of the stuff that honestly causes more frustration in this deal than anything. And because if we can persevere just a little bit and try to stay ahead of the curve, I think we can accomplish quite a bit together. Honestly, whether you're working alongside somebody else to help, but if you can put those things on a scale, maybe prior to, or I usually try to get people to do it at least once a week. And the earlier you start, honestly, get the pigs trained pretty well. So we'll even have people run gilts cross scale when we don't have to, in a breeding gilt deal where we don't have to worry about it. But sometimes it's nice to know anytime that you can monitor maybe where their gain's been. It can also help tell you a story a little bit about what they're doing from a maturity standpoint, or if you didn't catch a small, slight underlying health issue, you might be able to find something that way too. And so it's really for your own peace of mind as well as some of the animal. So that tends to be some of the most frustrating things that I deal with, I guess.
Yeah. So Brad, I know that you're new to your role, right? But obviously not new to the show pig world. So you're having, I'm sure, folks calling you, asking about, hey, we're 30 days out, and man, I can only gain about a half a pound a day. What are some of the questions that you're then asking them, and then maybe you guys can kind of play off of each other in terms of, Brad, you ask the questions that you're getting asked kind of to Yanis, and Yanis, how you would answer that.
Yeah, I just want to echo kind of what Yanis said to start with, and I think some of us, the more you do this, the more we kind of take some things for granted. And I tell you guys, if you're watching this and you're just kind of getting started, what that little nugget of information there about weighing once a week is a very big deal, because the more time we have to manage these problems, the better. And the farther we are away from panic mode, and you're going to find out really quickly that Yanis is technically very good at this in terms of very specifically how the products interact with both flesh, body condition, and muscle. And so the more time we have to spread that out, the less kind of extreme we have to be in holding, right? So our first priority is we want you to show. We want you to make the weight. And then on top of that, we want you to be very competitive. And so the more time we have to prepare for that, the better. And just to say exactly what Brandon said, we weigh every Sunday at our house, and we weigh full. Some people weigh empty. Just make sure that when you're doing that, you're keeping in mind the weight conditions, the same time of the day, and the same time after feeding or before feeding, so that you know that you're getting those average daily gains every time. To kind of go along with that, I would just start with something simple. So one of the questions I've been getting a lot, Brandon, is on the bottom side. So as you guys know, we've got some shows that will, probably allow even pretty light. I mean, 220. And then they're going to take those pigs on to maybe a major after that. And so if you thought you were behind in weight, what do you think the fastest way to get some pigs either to consume more if consumption's fine, but really just to kind of get them gaining a little bit more?
So I would say with that, there's a few products that would come into mind on our side, and the easiest one that will get you the most would be Explode. Would be a product that a ractopamine product that is going to really increase rate of gain. It's going to increase your weight. It's also going to do that by kind of resetting the growth curve in terms of maturity pattern and what they're doing, and laying down just a shot more muscle and those kind of things. And so you may ask, well, what if my pig's really heavy muscled? We've also went through and given those animals maybe a 3-day pulse on an Explode product just to give them a jump start. Sometimes things just need pushed in the right direction, and it could be just enough to increase their appetite, increase their gain. But I think sometimes when you hit one of those animals with a 3-day pulse, you get a week to 10-day sustainable gain out of that. And so it's not only just a short-term gain, but it actually will help kind of push you up over the edge from that standpoint. So, if the animal needs a lot of muscle, you can stay on a product like that just a shot longer if you need to. Calories from things gain weight just on calories, no different than people. I mean, if you need to gain weight, products that have more caloric intake, a Sumo, a Game On, some of those kind of things will really increase weight gain as well. And another product that we use in areas where maybe we really need to be careful on where we're at from a muscle standpoint. We don't need a significant amount of flesh, but our For Sure product, which is really, really safe, is one that as we enhance hydration and we enhance just the amount of water consumption that's going through animals, you're going to increase feed intake and you're going to increase gain. And so that one's pretty simple. And I don't think you're going to see any long-term negative on an animal doing that product. So that one's really, really simple. If you don't feel comfortable with where you are from a flesh standpoint, or you don't think you need a bunch of calories, that's something that at the end of the day, if you start one on it for 5 days, week, 10 days, you're not going to see a big crash at the end of it. But the more water consumption you get going through something. We had Stolquist on here a couple weeks ago talking about baby pig, starter programs and stuff, and he talked about having his kids go through there once or twice or 3 times a day and just cleaning the waters out. And every time pigs go to water, they go to a feed bucket. And so that one can be something pretty simple. And the nice thing about the For Sure product is you're going to get a little extra boost in nutrition with it. So not only will you increase feed intake there, but you're going to increase plant and nutrition a little bit too. So and with the Explode, I mean, always watch where you're at on the bottom side. I mean, I'm not saying you need to look at a 70-pound pig and go in and do some pulsing on there. Make sure you follow the feed label and those kind of things too. But those are a few on the low end, I guess, of ways that you can kind of spark them and get things going. And ideally, the further you are out, the better job you can do making sure that you don't have to use really extreme measures to hit your target. And so, and likewise with a caveat there, I mean, no, if you're on the front side, those pigs don't need to gain 2.5 pounds when they weigh 100 pounds, so just kind of know where your growth curve is and where you're at from that standpoint. So,
I think to add to that too, I don't know if you run into this too, but I think whenever I was a lot younger and I was maybe in an ag farm situation where I was just checking on those pigs, it's a little different when you have them in your barn at your house and you're really watching them quite a bit. So I always feel like the more you're around your livestock, you start seeing and you really identify, are they not gaining weight because they're not eating? And to me, we have to start with the simplest things first. And sometimes that's a health issue. And so, we take for granted the fact that we think they're wormed and they're just because they look healthy, there's not a worm issue or there's something like that. And so, I always start at the simplest thing first. And I love what Stolquist said about cleaning out the waters. I'm a clean feed, clean pens, clean water guy. And so I think anytime there's an outage or anything, we want to really put them in the best environment possible to make sure that they are meeting all those daily requirements, but then they're in an environment that allows them to, turn that into gain as fast as possible. And so I know a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to take for granted that you guys are doing the basics, but at the same time, you really need to look through because, we've all run into those situations where they're behind on weight and maybe the water is not coming out fast enough out of one of these nipples or it gets clogged up with some kind of medication or something. So, just really get in a good habit of testing those waters and stuff. I know that's simple and it doesn't sell feed, but I do think it makes your pigs better if you're on top of it.
And water temperature. I mean,
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Yep.
as you're along with that too. I mean, some of these barns have really tall ceilings. A lot of heat will stay up in the
Right.
top side of it if you're drawing your water from the upper level of your barn or whatever. I mean, that water that's sitting in the lines is gonna keep a little warmer temperature to it in the middle part of the summer. They're not gonna want to drink as much, and so there's some other I think a lot of times we tend to forget that water is the most important nutrient to all living beings, and so that's where we usually start on stuff. I mean, I've seen people miss with these cup waters and everything. Maybe something that a gilt that will sometimes back up and urinate in her water cup or something like that. It drives us all nuts. Sometimes they do it in their feeders, whatever it is. But it's a little harder for a bear to do that. But at the end of the day, they can all kind of take a poop in there or whatever, and that's not exactly something. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that if I'm ever gone or whatever. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I always say. Hey, if you do anything right, check waters, because I do believe that's the most important part of making sure they go to the feeder.
And I think that's one of those kind of pen conversations when you're standing around the show pens or whatever. It's that's one of the kind of tricks I've learned a little bit. Is that's kind of the questions we ask is not to get into the weeds as far as how do we get pigs to stop spilling feed, and then the other thing when they are kind of messing in the wrong part of their pen. And a quick tip on that is just try them in a different pen, swap them with a different pig, be surprised where they move. So Brandon, on the other side of that, after gaining, I'm going to ask you kind of what I would consider a softball question. I know you're going to ask me some real details, but I'd say a very common question is 30 days out, you got 30 pounds to gain. And let's just say flesh and muscle is good, and you're just trying to limit yourself to a pound of gain over that 30-day period. What is a quick kind of recipe or a strategy you go with?
I don't think holding pigs in particular is a simple task at all. Honestly, I think it's relatively challenging. At the end of the day, I think that there are some genetics and some types of animals that hold very, very easily. I think there's others that are quite a bit more challenging to do so. So I guess some of my list of things to go through are majority of the times are going to be, breed, sex. I'd like to know kind of what we're working with and some of the genetics that are behind some of those things, because at the end of the day, we all work with different genetics that all react to feed differently. They all require a different amount of feed to be able to hit their daily maintenance requirement, if you will, and not even talking about growth, just trying to hit maintenance to a certain point. And so, and I see that within a population or within a herd, when you use in some different outcross genetics, or you play around with something just a shot different, you're going to get a different requirement from a feed intake standpoint. You're going to get a different requirement in terms of of what their needs are, really, to still maintain a certain level of gain and growth and some of those things. So I think those things are very, very important. Where you're at in terms of frame size, length of body, body shape. A lot of those things are going to be very, very important. And then some of the other questions are going to be, do you need to show that animal during this 30-day time frame or not? It's very important if you need to go out and jackpot every weekend and still be perfect 30 days out, that's going to be a little bit different playbook, in my opinion, how to get there, because I'm probably more of a let's go target a show kind of feeder. And I'm very okay with if animals don't look right every day, as long as I know that I can get them where I need to be at the end. And so, if you're going to do something like that, where you're going to say, okay, this animal needs to be extremely full in the last 7 to 10 days, I need, let's say, half of that weight that you're asking, you need that half of that weight the last 7 to 10 days, you're going to have to be quite a bit more aggressive on the front side of that 30-day time frame in terms of pinching or sitting down. And so, those things are very important. Does that pig need to be extremely full on show day? Are they a bigger frame, longer body, later maturing type animal where you need to be almost maxed out in terms of intake, not only on feed but also on water? If you need to be maxed out, then you're going to need probably 15 of your 30 pounds in the last week. By the time you haul somewhere, you're going to give a couple days back. You're going to have to gain a few days to probably get where you need to go. And so those things are pretty important. And so, we've had some that to look their best have had to show hungry. Those animals are a little easier, honestly, to do that with. And that's why I think when you're picking and selecting animals on the front side, you try to have a little bit of a game plan on where you're going or what you're wanting to do from that perspective. But a few products that we will use quite a bit, and I say that true real muscle is pretty easy to manage and take away from in terms of holding an animal. I mean, if they have real muscle, you can sit on a lot of those animals for a very, very extended period of time and not really wilt a lot. But sometimes some of those animals that are extreme muscle, that actually does them a benefit to wilt on them a little bit if they get a shot more in check in an area or two. So, those things are not a bad thing. If you're sitting on an animal that has a tremendous amount of muscle and shape, and you need to flesh them up at that point in time, then the biggest thing that we'll do is pull our feed intake back and increase some calories and keep our fiber up there and keep happy. That's something that I know this is not exactly 30-day out talk, but this is the reason I believe in our full tank product quite a bit, is because I start those products very, very early on in life in a show pig's a career. And if you really need to sit on one for a period of time, you can feed quite a bit of full tank, and it'll keep them relatively happy. Their body shape will be good, and you don't have to worry about that thing climbing the gates from a certain perspective because their belly's full. I mean, we've held some pretty aggressively on just eating full tank for 40, 50 days. And those pigs will pretty much flatline. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody go out and only feed full tank to pigs for 40, 50 days, because if they don't have any muscle, they will wilt, and you'll have to go pretty hard to get it back. But that's a product that I feel pretty good with, particularly if they are smaller frame, shorter bodied animals that have muscle, and you kind of treat them like a big bred heifer to a certain extent, where you keep their body full, but you're not really enhancing flesh. You're not really taking anything away. You're really just keeping their center full. And so if I had a moderate sized, heavy muscled animal that was good on flesh, and I was 30 days out, and I said, man, I kind of need to sit this one still. I'm going to try to use 15 pounds in about 20 days is what I'm going to try to do. And we're going to back our feed intake down significantly, and increase our fiber. If their flesh is just okay, we'll increase some calories through there, realizing that anytime you increase calories, your gain's going to go up a little bit too. So you've got to be a little careful on where you are there, from that standpoint. But if you need to take something that maybe is not as good in terms of muscle and shape, our final control product is one that I believe in quite a bit. And even on some of those animals that have a lot of muscle, if you need a half a pound of a really dense product in terms of lysine, amino acids to still not entirely melt all their muscle away, that product is far more dense than a half a pound of 18G or 16G or something like that from an amino acid standpoint. So
let's back up real quick and kind of explain then the difference of what makes final control more dense than just a 16 or 18G, and why that correlates to either more or less gain.
So it's primarily just the amino acids and protein and stuff in there pound for pound. So it's a 28 protein, 1/8 lysine versus an 18, 16 from a protein standpoint. So basically, you just concentrate your amino acids in less amount of feed, so that you still keep their muscle right at the top side of their shoulder, right in behind their blade, but yet you don't have to worry about feeding them 2 to 3 pounds of feed. So that's a product where you can come in there and monitor the amount of feed that you're feeding, because we get this a lot too. People say, well, let's increase their oats or something like that. Oats is still a grain product. It's a carbohydrate. They're still going to break it down. They're going to make energy, and they're still going to gain weight, which is great. I mean, a lot of times we'll look at that as a filler, but it's not. It's a grain product. It's an energy. It's a carbohydrate. They're going to gain weight on a product like that. And so, those aren't, that's not an empty calorie, type feed stuff like people will think. So if you take your inclusion of, let's say, grains in a final control product in comparison to an 18G, your inclusions of grains pretty similar, but your amino acids is quite a bit higher. So from a density standpoint, I can feed half as much and still get the same effect in terms of muscle. And so that's why a product like that we would come in with. And honestly, I mean, I've had people use final control on baby pigs at 70 pounds. If they're going to do their due diligence and really want to extend one's shelf life a little bit, then we can go in there pretty early and monitor where we're at. But you don't know where you're at unless you put them on a scale or have a very, very good set of eyes, where you always know where you are. And there are very few people in the country that can do it without a scale. There's some, but not a ton of them.
Well, and I think your comment on full tank, it's a very phenomenal product if you start it early enough to kind of, some pigs, we've fed it to some of our gilts and stuff that we've jackpotted, and I mean, you'd think you were just adding the sweetest thing to it. They eat it no problem. And I've had some other pickier pigs that they'll kind of sift through it a little bit, and it's kind of like getting my kids to eat their vegetables. I'm not gonna pull it out, because I know that if I can get them to eat that, and I train them to eat that there's really nothing negative about feeding it. But if I need to hold them, if I need to add some more rear rib potentially, if I need to keep some fill and some rib shape and some rib cage in them, that is in that toolbox, and I'm not sitting there with a 250-pound barrow trying to train him to eat something. And I think last year particularly, You and I've kind of swapped some stories. Last year, particularly, everybody was trying to get one pig to a different show. And, we had a barrow that I'm not going to say he was the greatest thing in the world when he was over with, but it was an 8-year-old trying to get his expo pig to county. And I couldn't believe how good the rib cage held in that pig. And I think sometimes when we get real panicky, it comes around their center body. When pigs are shallow bodied and kind of harsh looking, we always want to throw the fat to them. But if you could roll that animal back in his feeding period and get some full tank in them, and it's a leaner rib and a leaner density of their center body, to where we're also not trying to add flesh, or remove flesh that we put on by adding fat, thinking that was going to drop their belly down. I know that there's other ways, and maybe some other pigs need that, but I think that full tank product is definitely something people really need to be, learning to use, because early on creates an amazing opportunity to hold them later. And then, like you said, if you kind of take it too far, where you're missing out on some of that fresh top shape, we can still add a little bit of final control or up the protein in our feed to get there.
Absolutely.
So I know that some people do this differently, but what's your theory, Brandon, around using quite a bit of fat, maybe alongside final control to slow one down? I know that there's a lot of different theories out there, but I mean, I remember a long time ago that there was, somebody told me, you feed a pound of fat and a pound of final control, and you will gain virtually nothing, and that will cover, that'll keep that pig pretty well happy. I'm not saying that that's the diet that will do that, but I just want to hear your thoughts around that thought process.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's interesting. I think fat is something that I think primarily, if you talk to people from different parts of the country, I think perception on fat is quite a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about areas of the country that that feed with a high percentage of environmental challenges in terms of weather or temperature, or you have a lot of them outside, then they tend to feed just a shot more fat and calories during times like that, based on just energy requirement for livestock. No matter if it was people. I mean, if we're outside a bunch working in the wintertime and those things, I mean, just to keep your body temperature up higher, you're gonna require more fat in the diet. And so I think some of it is based on geography, and I would say the other big difference is going to come into play on breeds and maybe what you're dealing with, because different breeds and sexes are going to lay down fat quite a bit differently. I'm not opposed to fat. I do think a lot of times it depends on how those animals are built and how they're made. Animals that have a very genuine round rib cage and body cavity in them tend to not need as many calories as some of those that are genuinely just a little flatter. Some animals, if you've had an animal that's required a 6 or 7 pound feed intake, those animals are going to be used to eating more calories. I mean, just number 2 yellow corn and those kind of things. I mean, there's a fair amount of calories that are in products like that. So if they've been accustomed to eating a higher feed intake, and you go and really cut them back, I mean, they're going to require a higher energy intake just for maintenance, and not only just trying to get any gain or anything like that out of it. So I would say that anytime if you've taken an animal and they're used to eating 5 or 6 pounds, and you're going to cut back to a 2 pound intake, then adding some calories is not going to be a approach. There's multiple different ways that you can add calories to a diet. You can feed a pound of fat if you want to. Another step may be using a milk it like product in water and letting them drink it. It's more of an empty calorie type deal, because you're still getting calories in them, but yet they're having to consume water, which is going to still extend and open up the body cavity and the stomach and those kind of things, so that when you get to that last week or 10 days and you need to go back on a heavy feed, that you still have the room and you haven't shrunk the stomach. to get back and start feeding on one. So, that's another option. And in a real aggressive mode, Game On is a tremendous product to utilize in water from that standpoint as well. I mean, we've had some people that get to the end and they really have no room at all, and they're just trying to get their animal not to wither away up high, and stay together. And that Game On product in a gallon of water will go a long ways with keeping them fresh, the upper third of their skeleton, and getting them to slam a gallon and a half of fluid will still keep their body shape relatively appropriate too. And so depending on how aggressive you have to go, I think there's multiple ways to back into an equation. But when you get down to that last week or so, and you're really up against the wall on weight, that's more of a rescue mission. And I think that as a whole, I think if we get better as a whole, just training ourselves to not go down that path and put them on a scale, or there's multiple different ways, whether you have to share a scale or load them up or whatever, and go somewhere, take them to a neighbor's house, take them somewhere that has a scale, get somebody that can guess weight within 5 or 10 pounds. There are a few people that can, but if you at least get a little bit of an idea of where you're at, man, you can really save a lot of headache on the front side. And I would say along with that, just trying to gauge those things early on, and not overfeed baby pigs when you first get them, and not to the point where you need to starve them when they're little, but we're getting ready to be here in the heart of kind of Midwest season for buying babies, and those pigs don't need to go home and go on 4 or 5 pound feed intake. And so those are some other things, just small stuff along the way. I know we're on 30 days out, but just a few things that I think would help kind of avoid some of the pitfall frustrations, because it's not fun for the families, and it's not fun when we feel like we're handcuffed and really can't help an exhibitor or youth fulfill what they want to fulfill, a successful project and show career.
Yeah. So while we're rolling, well, I guess back to your point there, Brandon, often 30 days out can be managed 60 days out and 90 days out.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a game that, I mean, I'm a terrible procrastinator, but you do not want to procrastinate if you can help it. And sometimes things happen, right? I mean, we can't control everything, and things happen. So I do want to take a second to answer some questions. I'm going to pull Josh's question up into the chat here. So what would be the difference, and could you hold or slow one down on rate of gain with stuffed versus full tank? Very good question, Josh.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say you look at those products from a fiber standpoint, and they're going to be very similar. I would also say if you look at them side by side, there's going to be a few more grains in stuffed than what there is in full tank. I mean, you're going to get a little higher rate of carbohydrate and some of those kind of things that are going to be in your stuffed product, and then your fat level is going to be quite a bit higher. So, I would say, depending on what your animal is like, you can feed a higher level of full tank than stuffed to get a lower gain or a similar gain, just based on how those products are designed and how they're developed. Now, with that being said, if you have an animal that you need to maximize body shape on and keep their gut full and those things, and yet they still need some cover, and you're still going to have to get them fleshier, then I would prefer to use stuffed in that scenario. But I would probably monitor the amount and or other products that I used with it at the same time, just because you are getting an inclusion of grain, you're getting an inclusion of fat and some of those things with the stuffed products. So, let's say just just for all sake and purposes, if you were going to have a pig that you needed to come in there and have on, let's say, a pound of final control, a pound of full tank, and maybe a pound of 18 or 16G. If you needed to use stuffed instead of full tank, then I would probably take your 18 or 16G back to maybe a half a pound, just because your inclusion of fat and your inclusion of grains that comes in stuffed versus full tank, it will affect your gain just a little bit. So that's a tremendous question. There are if you're wanting to if you're wanting to utilize a fiber source and still get some energy out of it, stuff's a great product in our lineup. I probably with what we do in terms of raising pigs, we raise a higher percentage of pures that typically flesh on their own and when they need to. I'm probably more of a full tank kind of guy on Barras when we start out, just because once I get them, on the full tank, then I can go back and forth. But both good products. Great question. Those are a few different ways where maybe I would manipulate through there. But I would say just you might want to monitor or change a little bit of where you're at, just from a gain standpoint.
Yeah, and I think one more, just adding to that, and I would say, like, if you're a guy who's feeding gilt specifically, where there's probably not quite as much penalty on having one with a little bit more condition late, and you're really trying to drive rib cage, drive bulk down low. If they got a little bit on the greasy side, because of a long-term exposure to any fat source, that's where stuff kind of comes in. I think another place where that kind of works is you can kind of jackpot on it too if you have one that you want to kind of keep in a certain weight range and you're still trying to add some calories. But I think, like Brandon says, when it comes to full tank specifically, if you're trying to prepare an animal to gain lean weight and hold their body shape, you're definitely going to want to get them rolling on full tank earlier. And so I think just know that there's a penalty to feeding any fat source long enough. They'll get a kind of a little bit more of an older bark on them, and in a Barra deal, that's just not going to work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good question.
Yeah, keep the questions coming, guys. Jamie, I see your question around what's the best feed for show quality for a 4-H kiddo. I mean, just real basic. Be 16G, Sunglo 16G or 18G. If your pig needs a little more muscle, don't be afraid of 18G. If you like the muscle that pig has, probably stick with 16G. I think that's a pretty basic, good way to answer that one. So let's jump into. Here we go. We've got a question from David. What's a good combination to use if we've got one that we can't get a purebred gilt to maybe drop her belly quite enough? So what would be, and this is an easier, this is a better question than trying to hold them. I mean, I think most folks would rather have to maybe deal with putting as much feed in front of them as they can. In some cases, not everybody, but I think most people would prefer to feed them a little harder. So Brandon, go ahead with David's question.
Yeah, I mean, like anything, I would probably ask kind of what you're doing a little bit, and if you if you have a chance to fill in there, I mean, I can talk off the cuff just a shot, but if you have a chance to fill in kind of what you're doing with those animals today, in our lineup, I think this is a tremendous opportunity where I would tell you blindly, some products that I would go to would be Smooth, Stuffed, and Smorfil, probably in this particular area, and honestly would cover probably pretty well. That complete feed product, Smooth of ours, it has been very unique in our lineup, and really does enhance body shape, in forerib shape, and it has a few different kind of fat sources in there that will really allow those animals to get smooth in a lot of different places. Honestly, it's a really neat product in terms of where it will enhance body. Stuffed, you're going to get a little extra fiber in there with that too. And then the Smorfil, if you have one that needs to do that, I'm guessing I'm guessing intake is probably not as good as what you would naturally want it to be. And so s'more fill is kind of a relatively unanimous go-to, I think, across industry, no matter what type of feed somebody may be feeding, because that one's really good in times of needing a little bit extra feed intake or times of stress. And so we like to utilize a little bit of that, or particularly if you have a picky eater, that one works great as well. So just as a quick and dirty, I would say that combination of smooth, stuffed, and s'more fill will go a long, long ways. And you don't need a tremendous amount of s'more fill. You don't need a tremendous amount of stuffed in there. And at the end of the day, you still need to get more base feed in animals. I mean, we can't forget that. I mean, supplements are supplements. They're supposed to supplement the base feed. And so, but in our lineup, I would say smooth would be the bulk of what you would want to go to there, and then supplement those two products along with it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to pull. Stacy's got a question here that she basically kind of whittled down a little bit for us, so it would fit in here, which I appreciate that. Gilt has plenty of muscle, needs some cover, but won't eat added energy. So to kind of push on that, her initial question up here, Stacy, which I appreciate you kind of whittling that down a little bit, but will not eat fat higher than 6%, will not eat feed with additives such as sumo or added energy. Yeah, so tough one for sure.
So I'll take that one. If I had to say right now, one of the, and I don't know if it was designed this way, but that smooth product, as far as a picky eater would go, would be a complete feed that I would really challenge you to try. Um, I see here that you were real specific on what the energy source is, or the energy requirement, or the fat level in a particular feed and what they wouldn't eat. But that smooth is a very, very palatable feed. And one of the things that you can do, we're not giving away very many of our products, but we will give away this. I definitely would, on an animal like that, would go ahead and start to feed that wet if you're not already doing that. And then, to Brandon's point a little earlier, another really good product on that particular animal would probably be something, if she's got plenty of muscle like that, to top dress that with a little bit of s'more fill. And I think you'd be feeding two of the most palatable feeds that we offer. And feeding that wet, I think you'd get quite a bit.
And here's the other thing: some of them are just problem children, right? I
Right.
mean, some of them just, I mean, what I would not recommend, because what everybody runs to in a situation like this, they get on all these forums and they get on these Facebook pages, which can have tons of great
Cake
information, and they throw cake mix at them, or pancake mix, or they get the pina colada mix from. I mean, save that for your daiquiris, not for your show pigs. Okay, so just because you're trying to add in, the problem when you do that, you're starting to get calories from sources that aren't going to actually help you. They're going to become addicted to those products if they eat them at all, and then it's going to sour their gut. And so, would 100% stay away from throwing a Hail Mary and trying to run through the cake mix aisle of Walmart to try to feed your show pig. Okay, we've got products that are specially designed to help you and help you get along. So, another thing that maybe could be okay in this scenario, if you need more upper rib, maybe try some milk it, maybe get a little milkshake action going, and get that in front of them. Now, again, use that with a little bit of caution too. That you're going to want to do that after they finish their total ration, so they don't kind of get addicted to just the milkshake side. But oftentimes when we stick milk in front of gilts, that can really help in terms of rib and body. Back 10 years ago, I mean, I remember people getting, as much whole milk or whole skim milk, or go to a dairy. I mean, they'd get as much as they could to get those gilts as fat and as fluffy as they possibly could. So, that could be an option as well.
And I wouldn't be afraid to. I don't. There wasn't much in here about feed intake or what kind of consumption they were getting in here, but that may be an opportunity where you could go in there kind of 3 parts feed and a part s'more fill, and maybe put your s'more fill just a little bit higher. I don't know where you're at in your feed intake on that particular animal. You said when you get higher than 6%, they kind of back off. Well, I mean, that smooth product would be just a shot higher than 6%, but if you would cut that in a 3-to-1 type of a scenario, you're going to get some benefit out of that and some extra intake just from your s'more fill and those kind of things. But that would be a nice kind of scenario there, maybe to go into, I think.
Yeah. Really good questions, and I want you folks to keep the questions rolling. We'll do our best to get as many of them answered as we can. So let's kind of dive into something, Brad, as you and I were kind of talking about what we wanted to discuss tonight a little bit. As we talk about like kind of the 7 days out, and what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about as we're getting really close to game time. Again, from a basic level, what are we packing in our trailers? What are we having on hand to make sure that we've got all the tools ready in our toolbox when it's time for us to go to the show. So I guess, Brad, what are you guys, or what are you telling your customers when it's right up to game time?
So I think well, one of the things we have to think about too is all the mills across the country are at this time of the year we're feeding livestock through the winter. Okay, so for our Texas folks, a lot of our feed stores, feed mills in general, their lead times get a little bit slower this time of the year just because everything's at capacity. So, I'm not one, and I used to be this way, but luckily I married correctly, and I'm not one now to wait until I get to the show at 2 o'clock in the morning unloading, realizing I need to find Forsure or find something like a s'more fill or something that I know I want at the show to make sure that they're going to eat. So a lot of the at show products, I mean, give yourself some lead time to to go ahead and get those products through your local stores and get them there. And so that'd be the two that I'd start with, just to make sure that we've got enough availability. And then I think at the other time is really be thinking about the situation that you're going to be laying these hogs over. I'm not talking about county. That's an ever-changing dynamic of these Texas majors on where we're laying over. And I try to do something. My brain probably works a little differently than others, and probably even too simple. But I just try to kind of work my way through. And I mean, I feel like it's on my way to a jackpot show or on my way to a show. I'm like, okay, do I have this and that? And that's where we just developed a quick checklist. And we take that with us, and we checklist things off as we pack to make sure that we're bringing our own water. I'm not saying I always use it, but I've got it handy. If I want to bring my own water, we never know where we're going to lay over and need some water. But we have a checklist that has all the basic stuff you have. But I just want everybody to be thinking right now, 30 days out, about what you're going to need, and give yourself plenty of lead time for that to be slowed down by everything that's going on in the world, really.
Yeah. We try so hard to control as much as we can, and really in this life we can't control a whole lot, but what you can control is what you pack in your trailer within the next 30 days. I mean, outside of whatever else is going on, but you want to make sure that you don't want to leave any variable up to the universe, and you want to make sure that you've got as much that you can controlled.
Well, and I think too, guys, I mean, it's a simple thing, but I think, doing very simple things very, very good and taking care of that is going to remove stress on everybody. I always think whenever, we were kind of growing up, and you go back and look at how we showed, we were probably a family that really struggled to make the sale. And then we kind of added on. And so we were, we learned from programs like this. And at the time it was in person. And I would tell you what I was always jealous of is just how calm the people that were winning were. They weren't kind of running around and acting frantic. And a lot of that planning was done at the house. And they really put themselves in these different scenarios. And they weren't necessarily surprised when pigs didn't eat. And they weren't surprised when pigs wouldn't drink. They put themselves in that scenario and brought enough things. And sometimes, at a show, guys, when pigs don't eat, they just want something different. Just want something different. And you're not frantically running around the barn looking for that. And so that's what we do. I try to put myself in those scenarios and bring enough stuff so that I'm relaxed. Definitely, Kyla's relaxed. The boys are relaxed. And then what that allows us to do is really just leave things alone for, in between that time period. We're not kind of running around crazy. And so if you have a plan and implement it, you're going to look pretty calm, and you won't react so frantically when things go wrong, because that's the thing we hate about show pigs. but that's also the thing that makes it kind of fun, is not knowing what's going to happen,
Absolutely.
and trying to react to it, right? And hopefully, you've got somebody at the show that can kind of lean on as far as, hey, what would you do in this situation? And it's always going to be something different.
Well, and the other thing I would say on some of that, and those are great things on the front side before, and I guess one thing that I would strongly encourage, or at least discuss, and I have these conversations regularly with people on sidebars, is don't try too much, too hard, too fast. Those things, they take a long trip, they get going. The more you try to shove at them earlier in the process, they're just going to balk quicker, halfway through. And so give them a little bit of time to bounce back. Don't shove everything too much. I mean, if you go in there and they take a quart or half gallon of water and things go good, leave them sit for a bit.
Yeah.
Let them rest. Sometimes you don't need to shove the feed at them 5 minutes after you unload.
Right.
A lot of times, overthinking it sometimes, I think, gets us to a point where we back ourselves in a corner too. I mean, they are living, living animals, an animal model that we're dealing with, and they're relatively unpredictable. But the further the more times you keep shoving something in front of their face, the more times they're going to quit way earlier. So I would say, make sure you check yourself a little bit there in terms of how fast and how hard you're going back to them. And if something's wanting to quit on you a little bit, sometimes give them a little bit of time, and they'll come back. There's a couple questions down here about, I think maybe like electrolytes or whatever. I don't know if you had any of that stuff on.
We'll pull Stacy's question in here, because I really like it. Your view on electrolytes before and at the Target show.
Yeah, and this is one that I like quite a bit, honestly. And we've talked about this product, or at least I have here on a few that, on feelings on things. And I'm a very big practice like you play kind of person. So when we go to a show, or if I'm helping somebody out, we're not trying something for the first time in a show, unless you're absolutely pulling a Hail Mary when
Very desperate.
You're at the 1 yard line and feel like you got 60 yards yet to go, and those kind of things. So I mean, for the most part, we're not practicing the first time at a show. So this is an area, and I've talked about our For Sure product quite a bit. I'm a big advocate of this particular product. We started 10 days out leading up to a show, and honestly, I said earlier, we're I'm sure that the time that my boys come to me and say they want to go jackpotting, Dad's going to have a small coronary, I'm sure, because I'm really more of a go to one show kind of guy. But on those particular animals, I mean, you're not going to get upside down with a product like For Sure. It's very safe. As I said earlier, you will get a little bit of gain from that product based on just hydration and getting water in them, and they'll want to eat more feed. But that's a product that we start in the feed, a scoop of feeding 10 days out.
Dry, Enos?
What's that?
You're saying you started dry?
We do, but I like to feed dry for the most part. I probably prefer to feed bears versus gilts, and I like to feed dry, and unless we're really trying to play catch up on weight somewhere, we may be wet towards the end. But that's a product that we'll go in there and feed a scoop per feeding 10 days out, and we get those animals used to that product in there. It does increase water consumption. So even when you put it in the feed, they're going to hit their cup water or whatever just a shot harder. You have that product in their system. It's not like you're trying to give a 3-year-old 4 cups of coffee before bedtime or anything like that. They know what they're dealing with. And you don't have anything that's going to surprise you at the end of the day. I still think that's one of the safest products on the market from a hydration standpoint.
What would you say it does to the animal visually?
You'll get more just puff and swell out of the animal, but that's just increased water intake. Honestly, is what they do. I mean, when you basically get them to intake more water, you're going to get more swell in their muscle. You're going to get more swell in their body cavity. Just everything's going to get just a shot bigger and a little puffier. And so that's why I like that product. You're not trying to take an animal that's marginal in terms of muscle shape and get a big, deep, ridged out back in them. It's just something that's going to give you more everywhere. And so, I get the question pretty regularly. Well, I'm going to go to a jackpot. So do I need to put that animal on for sure? And then am I going to have problems if I come off and then go back on? No, I mean, even when we go to a one show deal, those animals are going to have a 10-day period of being on for sure, maybe 25 days before the show, because we're going to practice early and know what we're going to get, know what our game's going to be, know the exact areas where we're going to get a little more manipulation on that animal and where the places it's going to target. And so that's something that, that's a product that I have a lot of faith in because it doesn't really get you in the ditch. But if you just, if you're just looking for a little extra hydration and a little more pig everywhere, I mean, that's a tremendous one. I mean, I would say if that product is not in your arsenal, you might want to look into trying some.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we don't have other electrolyte sources that we'll use along the way. I'm not saying that in a one-off, but there are virtually zero animals that I have not ever been able to use for sure on. Right. And there's a high percentage of animals that we haven't been able to go, a more aggressive approach from an electrolyte standpoint. So that's one that I think is very, very big. And if you haven't used it, I would say you're going to get far more of a broad spectrum approach to hydration, and that's the real important part of the electrolyte components, hydration.
Yeah, I would say that if you're kind of just getting started out and you wonder a little bit what you're missing in terms of like a show day bloom, I would say, there were times whenever we'd get to the show and the longer we were at the show, the worse I felt my pigs would look. The older that I've gotten and the more competitive that we've tried to get, and part of that's just watching other people and just trying to be more competitive. Brandon's alluding to something that is entirely important, and that is just water intake. I think one of the things that makes For Sure so good is it's very palatable. I don't feel like they back off the flavor of that so much. I mean, you can get some electrolytes where you can tell they get tired of a certain flavor and they'll try another flavor. I feel like our pigs are always drinking For Sure. I'm not saying you have to really pour lots of scoops in there, and there's pigs that probably don't need that much electrolytes and that stuff in their system when they're showing, to be quite honest. And so maybe I'm just using just enough of it to flavor the water to keep them drinking. And if you think you need to water your pigs and you're guessing, the answer is probably yes. If weight is not a problem, water them. And then when you think about it again, water them. And I'm not one that thinks you need to feed every hour, and stay up 24 hours and get them up and force them to eat. But if I had the manpower to water like that, I probably would. And I think For Sure allows them to stay taste-wise on for a longer period of time.
I would agree. And I probably didn't mention, we do that and then we get to a show and then we go in fluid, and everybody has different approaches. Again, animals are very, very different. So I think a lot of times it depends on where you need to be. There's some animals that do need to eat 4 or 5 pounds of feed before they go in the show ring. There are some that do. There's some that we've all had them. The ones that maybe are a little greener, they're a little later coming, and you always feel like you're a little bit behind the 8 ball, and even the morning of the show, you just wish you had a little more. And there are some animals like that. There's others where sometimes the best they look's the morning you get back there, and they haven't had anything until the night before, and sometimes that's the best they look. And so we've shown some empty, we've shown some full. I think that's something that if you have somebody helping you out along the way or whatever, be sure to kind of know where you're at, know how that animal needs to go, and that will allow you to manage your weight, kind of your show day prep, and those kind of things. But the really nice thing, and is we go dry with our for sure, and then we get to a show, and we typically will go in the fluid in the water. And sometimes we'll still keep a little bit in the feed. Depends on how hard we need to go with it or not. At that point in time, if you've been on a 7 to 10 day lead time, you already have that animal used to consuming that product at a higher level. It's not like they're not getting anything. So at that point, you're pretty okay. You're not going to max anything out and go too much at that point in time. But we will switch to water at that point. And to Brad's point, if you have that animal pretty well maxed out and you just need to get a little bit more water in them, but yet you don't need a high level for sure. Sometimes just a flake of it on top, or even a milk it type product where you just sprinkle a little bit of dust on top of the water will still enhance them to hit the bucket and hydrate just a shot more. And so you can play around with your concentration of said product, in a liquid pretty easily, in my opinion. And we pay a lot of attention to output, and the color and what you're getting. I mean, if you have an animal and they get up and they don't basically go to urinate or give you some back right away, they're probably not hydrated as well as they need to be. Look at the color of their urine. If it's pretty clear and pretty white, then you probably have a fair amount of water running through them. I mean, if it's a little darker, you're probably on borderline from a hydration standpoint where you need to be. And so, some things can seem very, very simple, but those will be always things that we will focus on in terms of where we're at from that standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I guess while we're on sorry to interrupt you, Brad, I just want to make sure we get all the questions answered over here. So kind of, Melissa, we'll come back to your question on smooth versus coast. I guess while we're still on kind of the electrolyte and the hydration conversation, we had this question earlier too by Hunter. What's the take on Sunglo Definition, Brandon?
Definition's a great product. I would say very different. So it is different from for sure in the fact that you're going to get a little more sugars and those kind of things in your definition product, where you're going to actually get a shot more shape and kind of fake ridged out muscle in the upper third of their skeleton. So it will work a shot more like some of those more aggressive electrolytes, where you won't get as much just smooth puff, but you'll actually get more topside definition. I would tell you that product is one that is not quite as palatable as for sure. And I would say that product was probably more popular when it was launched because our type of pigs was far different. We were not feeding those animals a whole lot. They were a little more naked in terms of body flesh and those kind of things, and we were just trying to get more topside shape and muscularity or the appearance of muscle and shape up high. So that one will probably target more the upper third of their body. It has a shot more of a bitter taste, so I don't think it's as palatable when you put it in water as maybe mixing in with the feed. Product still works very, very good. I would recommend people putting it in the feed 36, 24, and 12 hours out, and then getting water in them, because that's how that product works. But you're not going to get as much body puff and just expansion from side to side on that product as what you will on For Sure, but you will get a little more shape to the top side of their skeleton. So if that answers your question there, I think relatively well. But I would say don't don't put that product in a gallon of water and think you're going to get them to slam the whole bucket. It's just not. We've kind of learned that deal there a bit ago. I would say embed it in a small amount of feed, get them to consume it, and then see if you can go to water afterwards. Would probably be your best bet on that product.
All right, good question there, Josh and Hunter too. Well, let's bring in Melissa's question here: smooth versus coast, and I guess how we feel. But I guess really, to me, the question is more about what's the difference between smooth and coast. Because if you were to just look at a tag or just look at protein percentage, we're noticing that those are the two lowest protein options that we've got in our lineup. And I guess what kind of pigs would you be on smooth versus a pig that you put on coast?
I would say your biggest things to target and watch out for, in my opinion, would be true muscle, true shape, and flesh. Those would be the areas that I would really monitor, depending on where you want to be on moving a coast or a smooth type option, as well as allowable gain. If that animal still needs to grow, you're going to get more gain on smooth than you will on coast, pound for pound, just based on some caloric intake on that product. There's going to be a little more fat in smooth than what there is in coast and those things. So really monitor the type of muscle and the type of flesh an animal has. I think, and I've said a few times, I think coast is a very good product when you have an animal that has a very, very real muscle to the top side of their skeleton, because the first place that you will see any issues on coast at all, particularly if you're really looking at the very end game and needing to switch to a feed the last 30 days, is the biggest thing they'll do is they'll lose a little bit right behind their shoulder if they're not extremely real from a muscle standpoint. With that being said, if you have an animal that's that has a very big, shapely, pretty fresh back, but maybe a little too wide in their stifle and pushing the envelope a little bit behind, that product is going to offer some benefit, because it'll allow you to get in check just a little bit more, maybe mitigate some muscle development, and those animals tend to balance up just a shot better when you do that. At the same time, I do think that those animals have to have a little more flesh on them as well. I'm not saying that you're going to strip one down from a flesh standpoint, but you will not get as much flesh on coast from a bloom and bulk standpoint as what you would on smooth. So I would be really cognizant of where those animals are, right at the top side of their shoulder, right in their forearm, not only from a muscle and flesh standpoint, but if you get an idea where you are, and then kind of have a good idea of what your allowable gain is, and then that'll kind of dictate a little bit of where you need to go. If you don't have access to smooth, or if all you have is coast and you need to make it feed a little bit more like smooth, you could add some game on at that point in time, so that your calories would increase a little bit, and particularly in the area where maybe you would want to freshen up, right at the top side of their skeleton. That would be a great way to make coast feed a little bit more like smooth. If you don't have access to it right at the very, very end, or if you're 2 or 3 days out and you can't get something in a short period of time, that'd be a nice way to go about it. So hopefully that helps you on some of the differences there. I know, Brad, you had talked about having a cross gilt. You fed this this last summer where you had used some different stuff on, and so you could probably put a real world experience
and
there too.
That gill is naturally very, very hard backed. Very good pig. Got a little wide at times in her life, but not like Bowie, more just like a very, very dense, wide muscle to her. That particular animal, and I would tell you, I learned a lot about Coast at that point because it'll do something in a hurry. And I think what Brandon's alluding to, if you're not careful with Coast, it'll kind of yank the just bloom out of one because I mean, it is, in my opinion, I'm being told to tip my camera down. My IT guy. Thanks, Nathan. Is that to try to get the glare off my forehead or what? So,
I know you're short. I just didn't want you to like tail off so much,
yeah,
into
it's
the.
funny. Yeah, you're not the only person that texted me that. That's okay. Maybe you just wanted to see my shirt. But no, I think on Coast, what I think is really great about Coast particularly is it will do something in a hurry in terms of toning one down. And so, I think at this stage in your life, that pig's life, if you are, just got done with jackpot season and maybe we thought there was too much muscle. And like Brandon said, I would consider very dense muscle, and you've got a little bit to burn, and you think you can trade a little bit of muscle for a little bit better build. I'd throw them on Coast for a little while and know when we come back off that Coast that animal, for a lack of better terms, is trying to be heavy muscled again whenever you throw a denser feed back into it. Whereas the way I've noticed with Coast, with Smooth, for a lack of a better term, is it's just going to kind of make them smoother. And so if you've got one that's a little bit kind of harder in spots, ham loin junction, maybe, needs a tick of flesh, but you're also trying to slow them down in terms of muscle, you can do that. The other kind of unique thing for me that I've noticed about Smooth particularly is I feel like I can add it to some other feeds. And I would tell you, I know we're not on this topic, but taking something like an 803 and adding it with Smooth is going to give you an immense amount of bulk and freshness. And so to me, if I can take an animal that I've come off of Coast with, and when I come back off, I'm ready for some compensatory gain and some massive amount of back shape and flesh at a very quick time, and trying to hit that specific window when that animal can handle that kind of bulk and mass, I'm probably coming off of a Coast and I'm hitting them with something like whether I'm going to more of a game on look, if I feel like I'm behind in flesh, or if I think I'm behind in muscle, I can go back to something like an 18G or a 803, or I can add that Smooth to it. And I think playing around with those feeds is pretty impressive. Like I feel like when I'm wanting to kind of rip one down and get it back in check and keep myself out of the ditch, from a muscle standpoint only, I'm using Coast. But I feel like if I'm trying to just kind of keep some fat and slowly add fat, and that's the way we want to add fat, is slowly, I can do it with Smooth. And man, it puts a bloom looking one like a baby pig to me. And it's an impressive feed when you get one on at the right time. And
Yeah.
I would warn you on Smooth a little bit is, I know when people say this, it's a compliment. I don't mean it trying to brag up a bag of feed more than a guy should. But I don't look at the tag on that Smooth quite as like a 15. I don't know how you're seeing that, Brandon and Nathan. It does not feed like that to me. And I don't mean that makes it good. I just think you need to really kind of play around with it a little bit and understand how that's interacting with your feed program. Because even though they're 1% different in terms of protein, I do feel like that Smooth will hold one shape a heck of a lot more and 1% better.
Yeah,
Well, I
acids.
think some of it's the increased fiber in there too, because you do get quite a bit more expansion, I think, in the upper part of their body too, on that. So I would agree. I would agree.
Let's jump to the next question here from Crystal. And Brad, I want you to take this one. I know it's going to get kind of cut off, but long story short, watering from a bucket, versus using a continuous, water pipe there that you see in your pen. So kind of talk about the difference there and really why we want to water fresh and out of a bucket.
Yeah, so I don't want to hurt the tube sales at all, but we're not going to be putting those on it anytime soon, and for a couple of reasons. One, they leak, and two, they're open on top. And so to me, when I show up at the end of the day, or the first thing in the morning, and I see an empty tube, that means it's a good thing, and I feel like I'm not obligated to water. It's a good habit to get in, to train your pigs to drink out of a bucket even at the house. I love knowing, maybe I'm not going to geek out as much as we did in the mid 90s about trying to measure exactly how much they are drinking. And maybe you have to do that to maintain weight, but let's just pretend that weight doesn't matter. We've already weighed in and there's no way back. I still want to know that that animal is on pace as far as its hydration level throughout the day. I don't care what temperature it is, we got to have water. And so, assuming that the animal drank whatever you put in that tube, and assuming that you're the only one or the only thing that dropped in that tube, I would say there's been times at county fairs we help out families, and at the end I watch them dump out that tube after a week of being at a county fair, and it's absolutely disgusting in there. And so I come back to three things that if I'm helping one family that's just kind of get started: clean feed, clean pens, clean water. And that's at the show is so easy to attain because you're literally going and getting the clean water, and you don't have to worry about, like we talked about earlier, a water line getting hot or anything being in it. So I understand we're trying to do everything to keep water in front of them, but I want to know they're drinking it and know if they're not. And that's where we might, offer a different water source where we're top dressing with a little Forsure and trying to get them to drink. So, awesome question. Thanks for asking that for sure. But I would definitely move towards watering. And I'm kind of an every, hour, 2 hour guy where I'm
Yeah,
hopping them
definitely.
up, and then we're going to try to water quite a bit.
And I think it's interesting on that comment how many times you can go in there on a pig that's on a cup water and just, give them a
Water.
bucket of clean, fresh water
Yep.
straight out of the well, and they will drink a lot more of it than you would think.
And I think what's interesting, Brandon, you can take a pig, and we do it. We rinse a lot. We've kind of found this. You take them into the washer rack, put the hose in front of them, they'll sit there and drink a gallon of water, and they just came out of a pen with fresh water in it. And so just that offering of different fresh, like you said, I think that is the secret. I'm telling you, getting water into them at a show is the secret. And I think the guys that are really good at this wish the show you could be there for 2 or 3 weeks, because the gap's going to get wider and wider on who's not watering and who is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, water is critical. If you think about what a muscle is made of, it's water.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much water that's actually in a muscle itself that if we are depleting that muscle from water and hydration, think about how bad you feel as a
Right.
person, when you're not well hydrated. It's no different. We treat our animals, especially on the show pig side, not just show pigs, but all show animals, as high-end athletes. Well, you watch any athletic event, you pay attention. They're being hydrated constantly. So it's no different. Think about your animals as high-end athletes, and take care of them that way. So let's drop in Brad's question here about Game On, and this is a question that we could spend the next hour talking about this one. But Brandon, I know, and Brad, well, all of us. Game On is probably our favorite product that we have in the Sunglo lineup as a whole, just because it's a borderline no miss type product. So Brandon, go ahead with this one, man.
Honestly, I think we learn. I think we learn more ways that the product can be used every day, or I think sometimes it's just getting put in a predicament where you need to do something and figure out a way you need to go. It virtually can be used on just about every animal.
Hang on. Let's back up just real quick. Just real quick as a second. For the folks we still have over 90 people watching. We've had an incredible amount of folks tuning in and watching this. So let's maybe back up just a shot, Brandon, and maybe explain kind of what Game On is and how it's a different kind of a fat than really your normal kind of white fat that you might find from other companies or ourselves within Sumo.
Yeah. So it typically gets put in a fat category, and I honestly, this is something I've said forever. It's not. It doesn't sit in a fat category. It may sit in a bloom and bulk type category, but it sits in a category of its own. Honestly, in terms of what it does and the specific areas that it'll go in and target. I don't care whether it's our white fat source or any other companies, you name them, they're all going to be relatively similar in terms of the areas of the body that they're going to target. And it's pretty much going to be all over. If you look at a sumo or any other dry, dry fat source, a saturated fat source, it's going to kind of go over anywhere in the body. And so, you're going to get a little more lower fat. You're going to get some fat, the upper part of their skeleton. You're going to get, some fat down in the seam of their ham or in their crotch or those kind of things. You're welcome, Nathan. Down in their elbow pockets. And you're if you use a white fat source, that fat's going to go eventually. It's going to go wherever in the body that you're going to get some external fat, on the animal. So it's no different than us. I mean, you sit there and you eat gallons of ice cream at dinner time. You're going to put it everywhere. It's not just going to target one location. So, Game On is it typically gets put in a, people say, well, I'm either going to feed this fat source or that fat source. And honestly, it's very, very different. It is far more digestible than any other kind of bloom type agent or fat source, that you have. The other neat part about it is there's some protein that comes with it as well. So if you look at a lot of those other, white fats, they're basically just a calorie source. You're not getting an extreme amount of protein or anything else like that. And how that product is assembled, it's far more digestible. And with that extra protein and the digestibility, it'll target the upper third of their body very specifically. The top side of their shoulder, right in behind their blade into their upper hip. And it doesn't really, navigate down in towards their jowl or their lower neck or throat. It doesn't really navigate down towards their elbow pocket and their lower forerib or back into their mid body or flank. You don't get that, you don't get that sloppy kind of a look back through behind their sheath or back to the latter part of their underline on a gilt or those kind of things. I mean, it stays pretty specific to the upper third of their body. And so that right there and how it goes on and those things is very, very unique. And so honestly, it doesn't really have a competitor product in terms of locations and how it will go on. The other neat part about it is, I think when you look at products that you may go a little too hard with or you go a little too aggressive with, some of those products on a white fat standpoint gives you, if you back it down, you still have problems in the areas that you've created. Okay. And so the Game On deal, you haven't really created a lot of negative problems. The only thing that I have seen maybe where you've went a little too far is an animal that that I would say is maybe just a little fake or a little inverted in how they're actually built. If they come to you a little narrower in their lower skeleton, you can build a pretty big back end one where those animals don't look. They look even more fake sometimes coming to you. If they're really narrow underneath, and so that's a place where you might want to watch out where you're at, because you can get some of those animals to shelf up quite a bit, right in behind their shoulder and get some bulk and spread. And if they don't have some real base and some heart, they can look a little bit, a little more manufactured, I guess, from that standpoint. But really the neat part about the Game On is if you feel like you've gone too far and you get an animal to that point, just back your inclusion down. I wouldn't back it completely out, just back your inclusion down and you'll be able to get back more in check. But the nice part about it is you haven't created a significant amount of issues in your process of potentially going too far. And it's so digestible that you can get a very quick response and not get a lot of negative with it. It's a neat product.
It is.
I think sometimes when we're just getting started out, we confuse bloom with fat a little bit. We confuse bulk with fat a little bit. And so I'll be honest, I probably waited a season too long to start Game On because I wasn't in search of another fat product. I just thought that there was plenty of sources out there of different fats in general. Um, we forget Game On's almost 30% protein.
Yeah.
And it's 50% fat and 30% protein. And so, what's incredible about that product is we talk about a dense ration in terms of some of those other deals. You're not going to find anything more nutritionally dense than that. And then oddly enough, that palatable. I mean, you can find some really high protein sources and some high fat sources. And what you'll find is the longer you feed those, the more they'll back off in terms of appetite. And so I don't care what it is. Sumo after a diminishing return after a certain point, they're going to back off of appetite at a certain point. And so I think what Game On does uniquely is it allows you to do two things at once in terms of adding muscle, particularly up high, and at the same time adding fat at almost the same level. And so you get that uniformity, and that smoothness, that blending between those transition points is really good. It's really hard to get. What else I like about Game On is you can kind of upgrade any kind of holding ration to maintain that top shape. I'm not going to tell you if you're holding one and you need belly. We've got other stuff that can do that. But if you're holding one and you're, let's say, holding one on coast, to allude to Yanis's point earlier, and you think you're losing a little bit of top shape, a very small amount of Game On top dressed on top of that is going to hold a show day bloom or very close to it, jackpot quality, for quite a long period without a big setback. And so there's a lot of creative ways. I think it's really unique what I'm hearing people doing. I know I've in other species, as far as mixing it with water and feeding it like an electrolyte, quite honestly. And I think that is something that I'm going to be playing around with quite a bit. And once again, being a season late to it, I feel like I'm playing catch up on kind of the R&D. Nathan, you and I have talked about kind of just the alchemist type of person that likes to kind of mix up stuff. And I'm going to start playing around with that a little bit more. I might even put a couple of scoops on my Cheerios. I could probably use a little bit of that myself. But I think Yanis, what do you think about, you and I have talked a little bit about show day fill with using some s'more fill. And I know people have asked about that. And one of the applications of using Game On in a particular mixture, do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, I mean, a s'more fill product works pretty good, particularly if you don't have to worry about feeding one's muscle. I mean, you're feeding 3 hours before show. It's not like you're going to get enough time to digest and get the grams of lysine to the muscle in time, through the digestive tract where they need to be absorbed and all that. So typically when we get there towards the end of the wire, we're just trying to get body shape pretty right. And so sometimes just adding a little bit of either Game On, Milk It, or a Sumo type product, either one, to some s'more fill and soaking it and letting them eat that can just increase your energy and calories and those kind of things without feeding 6 pounds of feed, and so that you can kind of just maintain where you're at, but yet not have them trying to run a marathon on a buffet belly.
Well, and I think when you and I talked about that, it kind of opened my mind a little bit to something is, I'm not saying these pigs are running a marathon or a sprint, but I promise you the amount of physical exertion in their life, that is about as max as they're going to do. When you think about driving through that ring, getting up from the pins, depending on one of these Texas majors, then that waiting period, and then kind of exploding back out, and then the stress their body's under. I bet their heart rate's never been higher and maintained for that long. I don't care how much you exercise them at the house. And so to me, I probably never put enough thought into what was in that animal's belly show day. I'll be quite honest, at times maybe the only thing I put in there is whatever I had left. I think going forward, I'm going to use that mixture going forward at these majors, because there's a few times in my life that I would tell you when we showed, there's a few things that we've done a little bit overboard. We've probably pushed some electrolytes. We've pushed some different things. And what was in their belly backfired on me drastically. And that's just something you can't have back. We've all seen animals tie up. Yanis was alluding to it earlier about the safety of electrolytes. And if you don't know what that means, it's basically what's in their belly that can cause them to tie up, fight the whip, break down, even though everything was done and all the research was done at home. And so I think on show day is what he's talking about is utilizing some game on, some more fill and water, and letting that be what's in their belly. And that's no different than what an athlete would think about was in their belly before, their athletic event. And I think that's just the evolution of what we're doing and how hard this thing is to begin with. And I think we really need to put a lot of thought into that on what's going to be in their belly on the most important day of their life whenever we bought them for.
Back on Brad's comment there, about when and how, in terms of, when do we start it and how long. The one thing I would say is how I just gave some comments about, where it's easier on, and yet you don't get in the error of having major issues from creating problems. I would say that is a product where, you don't always know unless some of these genetics will throw you a curveball. A lot of times people will know what they are if you don't have a lot of those great conversations with the breeders to kind of have an idea of, how long you can wait to do something. Then this is a product that I would say trial a little bit earlier, make sure you get the response that you want, and then you can always plateau or back off a little bit. I would say in general, on purebreds, they tend to be quicker at fleshing on game on than some crosses will be. And what you'll run into there is sometimes I have seen some of those crossbred genetics, so you'll have to feed it just a little bit longer because they will initially gravitate towards the protein components in there, and you won't get as much just flesh as quickly on that product as what you may on a purebred right out of the gate. So you're not going to cause any long-term issues if you started earlier, because it's not going to work like a white fat where you use too much and then you're like, oh man, now I've got to play catch up because I got them too fat. You're just not going to get to that point. So I would say the how and when is going to depend on a little bit of genetics and breed and some of those kind of things and what you're working with. But I would say on that product there, don't hesitate on your 30 days out. If you don't know how one's going to react, play around a little bit with that product, and you can always reduce your intake or increase your intake from there.
Great question. Bottom line, feed game on.
It does work.
It does work. Yeah. Okay. We'll touch on Kim's question here briefly, and then jump to Derek's. So we got a little, maybe some rack judging, which I'm not familiar with whatsoever. So Yanis, this seems like a good question for you.
I think if be more specific, that would help me out just a
Which
shot.
animal?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to figure. Let's see.
Well, as Kim maybe fills in the blanks for us a little bit, let's jump on down to Derek's question. I love this question. I think this is such a relevant question for anybody that's tuning in, but really for what the topic is tonight. What's the best way to maybe melt one back and then rebloom them up after a county show or local show to take the same pig to the state event, say 3 to 4 weeks later? Excellent question, Derek, and I can't wait to hear what the answers are.
So on that one, I know for me, the first question I'm thinking of is when you say melt one back, or I'm thinking that we've got plenty of muscle, that you just max this dude out. And I think you said after county, is that right? Yeah. So after county and rolling back, I'd put that in the same category as the one I was talking about earlier. If I've got one that's pretty maxed out, I'm probably putting that. This is me, and I want to, and I hope Yanis is different, because I think, just remember, guys, there's way more different ways to do this and 2 different ways to do it. So I'll tell you, I am one that I'm always kind of really almost too concerned with our hind legs and movement, and so I'm one that I'm probably using coast, dialing them back just a little bit that way, because one of the things I like, we kind of talked about this earlier, I really like them to gain a chunk of weight right before they're walking in the ring. I think animals that are gaining weight as they're showing, look a lot better. And we get a lot of achievement of bloom when they're gaining weight. And so I'm sitting on that animal if I've got enough weight to mess with, or if I'm trying to dial it back, I'm playing it out in terms of coast and sitting on it. And then I'm preparing myself and saving some of that hold and gain weight late. I'm saving some of that so that I can kind of come back and do the same thing I would have done to get it maxed out to start with. Whereas I'm adding, like Brandon said, I'm adding game on. I'm coming back because I want what's called compensatory gain, where I'm kind of pulling the rubber band back in terms of bloom and bulk, and I'm ready to throw it back on them. And I think for you guys who are going from county on, be patient with your eyes and don't think they need to stay the same all the way through for that final 4 weeks, because that is something that, as a person who jackpots a bunch, will kind of ruin a lot of livestock, because you're trying to maintain bloom and actually not allow that animal to mature into its final weight. Taking a 220-pound barrow, and I know that's what you guys are doing, is taking a 220, 30-pound animal and then getting it to 270. Allow that animal to prepare to gain, maybe even 15 pounds, 20 pounds in a short amount of time, and allow that to be spread and bloom. And so that's the way that I do it. I would probably start off with something like a coast if we have plenty of muscle. But if I did my homework and he's sitting good, I would have started that animal way back on full tank. He's ready on full tank, and I'm upping the full tank to just sit on him in terms of weight. And so goes back to the very beginning of the video, where even if I wasn't feeding him a full tank at the county, I've prepared that animal to kind of sit and hold body weight that way.
Yeah, and I would say, there's a couple different ways. I mean, you may be wanting to melt muscle a little bit. If it's flesh that you're wanting to go at, I would say, another deal would be, and we do it quite a bit. I would say I would put the differences in counties and then going on to a state event or major pretty similar to trying to take one animal to go through a lot of what we would call our Midwest kind of majors here, whether it be, the Expo to CPS or Louisville or whatever it may be. And now this coming summer may be as exciting as anything with the close proximity of 4 different national events that that people can show at. And so as I read the question, and I could be reading into it wrong, but if you're taking the approach that you're taking an animal and you're trying to kind of speed up their maturity and their flesh so they look like a fight and weight market hog at maybe 230 or 40 pounds, and then essentially you're needing to shut back down and make sure that they don't stay on that same growth curve or whatever, or lay down flesh at the same level for the next 3 weeks. How do we reset their maturity curve for a week or 10 days and then bounce back and flesh them back? And so this would be something that we've probably done more, or at least I've done more with a lot of my customers. Maybe we've pushed Game On and some of those products to a point leading up to Expo that we're maybe getting a little more aggressive because we're trying to make that barrel at 240 to 250 pounds or maybe 255 pounds, be able to get a banner if he's good enough, at the end of the day. And fortunately, we've had some success with those barrels at 250 pounds, very candidly. And so, some of those pigs, if you don't push those envelopes and get them kind of fleshed up, then they're not in the right bloom and maturity to hang that banner. Then if you want to take that animal back and reset them so that they don't continue on the same path from a fat composition standpoint, we've had pretty good luck going back home for that next week or 10 days and hitting the final control or even Sunglo product a little bit harder and peel some flesh off of them. If it's not actual muscle that you're concerned about, and you're just wanting to make sure, particularly on a purebred type barrel, if you're concerned that the next 40 pounds of gain, let's say, or 35, 40 pounds of gain is going to be the wrong kind of gain, and it's going to be flesh and composition to where they look like a butterball, then those animals, I would say, you need to go back home, put them on a higher protein, lower fat type product, or maybe give them a week of reset to where they just kind of chill out and maybe don't gain a whole lot, strip down a little bit from a flesh standpoint, and then go back again and bolster your density of diet with maybe going back to an 803 type product, and some game on it and those kind of things to bulk back up. And those are things that we've done quite a bit with, whether we've got one showing at 240 in the first part of June, and we want to get to the end of June or first part of July, and we look pretty maxed out, particularly for their size, frame, weight, and maturity, and you still have 3 to 4 weeks to go, then you probably need to take a gut check and slow them down a little bit in terms of the pace that they're putting flesh on. And I would say, I talk about this quite a bit, and have that, animals' physiological maturity, for the most part, is those animals are going to hit their college years about 150 to 165, 70 pounds. And so everything that we do after that stage, they're not putting on lean gain after that stage. They're turning some of those calories into flesh and putting down fat. So once you get to that point, if they're really starting to lay down a bunch of fat cover, then that would be an animal that I would come back and maybe limit intake if you feel like you can. Now, if that animal is only going to be a pound a day gainer, then maybe you still need to feed a higher volume of feed, but just keep your protein lysine higher and your fat lower. You'll help do some of those things from that standpoint. So depending on what way you're going there, I think both options are pretty good. If you've had that animal pretty well in the right flesh, or you're needing to melt down, whether it's muscle or fat, my guess is that animal will flesh back up or bulk back up relatively quickly. So don't be afraid of being a shot more aggressive that first week back home, especially if you're okay with where your health is. Now, sometimes, as we all know, commingling everything, sometimes they naturally do that on their own the first week when they come back home. And so just be mindful of that. If their intake is not on the right path and those kind of things, they might be doing a little bit of that on their own. So don't get real aggressive. If they're not healthy, don't change up a bunch of stuff. You're going to do yourself more harm than good. But those are a few things that I would probably have crossing my mind.
So as we start to maybe wrap up just a little bit here, as it's getting almost 10:30 on the eastern front, we've got a couple questions that are kind of looks like Shane and John both have similar questions. I'll pull Shane's question over into, what do you recommend for trouble areas like jowl fat or throat latch?
So the first thing that jumps out to me on that would just be, top dressing some final control, and and starting to kind of burn them down just a little bit. But the one thing I'd add to that is I think sometimes we can get carried away with just going all in one direction. Okay, so I think just remember, as we're managing body condition, what I don't like seeing is somebody, they see this one problem, right? And they hyper focus on this one problem. And to your point, Shane, I would definitely start off with top dressing, a little bit of final control. But at the same time, if we look at that, and he is a very big bodied, very bulky animal that has fleshed up too much down in their throat and into their cheek area, I tell you, final control is a great way to start to kind of lean them back up. Now, if you've got an animal that, when this is what I see a little bit more, is what throws their balance off is they're kind of a skinnier animal, and then the thing that jumps out at you is they fleshed up too much in their jowl. What I'd tell you is that animal's balance would probably benefit a heck of a lot more from you just letting it mature and belly down and try to get more rib into it so that its rib matches that. And so I would typically tell you, for instance, we show a lot of Durox. And at times when I hit an animal and I Durox just oddly enough, at about 180, 200 pounds, sometimes for whatever reason, they've started to mature in the front third of their body. And I feel like what I want to do is burn down their neck. And what I end up doing is just kind of ripping all the flesh out of them. And what I would naturally do is at that point, I'm adding more full tank. I know that kind of sounds weird, but once that animal gets through that adolescent phase and it stops growing and starts bellying down, I will tolerate the front third of its jowl a little bit more. And so letting that animal mature into it is sometimes the best. But for me, particularly, if I've already there, I'm past that kind of maturity, and I'm kind of at the end where I need to burn something down. To me, that's the best protein source for that. You know, you can get kind of extreme with some Sunglo, but I would start off with Final Control.
I think it's important too to keep in mind, just to touch on Brad's point a little bit, there is no one fat burner or feed product that's only going to target one area on the animal.
Absolutely.
I don't care what any feed company says, what anybody says. When that animal is consuming high levels of protein, lysine, amino acids, whatever, their entire body is digesting those, not just their face. So also keep that in mind, just to kind of bolster Brad's point a little bit.
Well, I think at times, like, it's like, just to take it to another step is, you'll get beat because of, one spot that's too lean. And so what we end up doing is just getting the whole thing fat. And then what you have is a fat pig that's still too lean in its ham loin junction, but it's marginally better. And so, my comment to this is look, we make a lot of products that will do some very extreme things. Hopefully, if you start picking up on those things from the beginning, you will not have to use those extreme products in high volumes. You can make some small changes to get there slowly. And be it cattle, pigs, or anything, the more time we have to fix these problems and kind of to manage that, the better and more appropriate that flesh and muscle is going to blend on them. And so, Shane, the Final Control product will help with that. And hopefully you've got that animal I was talking about, kind of like a short back, big bodied one that's just conditioned a little bit up front. And his whole body could benefit from just peeling a little bit of that bark off. But like I said, if you look at him and the first thing you see is a lean animal with a fat neck, I am probably trying to get him to proportionally body down more so that the front part of his body is more tolerable. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, don't miss the forest for the trees, basically.
Yeah. And to go along with that, I think it depends on what stage of their life that you're putting this read on them and trying to figure out what to do too. If you're at the very end and that animal needs to shape up and peel down a little bit, up front, but they can, they don't really need to eat much from a muscle standpoint or anything. I mean, you can throw some Final Control, Game On in there to keep their calories at maintenance. Because the best way to peel flesh is to put those animals in negative energy balance, which is not feed them enough. And so when you go to peel or burn on something, you're basically trying to get their body to go in catabolism, so that their body strips down the inside of their body to get rid of something. So it's interesting to. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of different holding products. There's a lot of different ways to peel something down or to burn, but sometimes it makes sense to use a burning type product with another product that's going to maintain some flesh in certain areas. If I'm trying to make sure that I keep tightened enough right at the very end, I'm going to use a Final Control product, but still have a little bit of Game On in the mix, because at the end of the day, the last thing that I want to peel flesh from in the very, very end is from their back. And so, I want that to be as big and broad as it can be. And anytime that you add a little bit of flesh on both sides of their back gets a lot bigger. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I thought you were. I want to make sure that we do this too. Is if you're still watching with us, it's probably because you're trying to make it over a certain hump. I guess I would tell you, and you're trying to find a magic lever to pull or a button to push that's going to fix these problems. And boy, if we could sell it, we do it. We do it for you. And I think we've got some products that can help with those things. But I will tell you this: this would be my piece of advice to everybody as we sit 30 days out. The thing that got you beat at a jackpot show at 110 pounds is probably not going to be what's wrong with that pig at 280 pounds. Okay. And what you don't want to do is add to those problems. And so really become good evaluators. Be open-minded as we kind of go into this county fair and national show or a major show push. Be open-minded. Look at what's beating you. See if it's something that you think that's part of that range of things you think you control. Hey guys, if it's skin, hair, and showmanship, do it. Fix it for next year. But if you think it's something that's going to be in your feeding capability, I would strongly tell you that there are small things that beat baby pigs, okay, at baby pig shows that have nothing to do with the 5 seconds of coming straight at you over the top and going away to catch a pin be at one of these big Texas majors down here. And so just do not forget that it's going to take bulk and mass. It's going to take some power. And so if we're going to take a little bit of cheek or something to get there, we're going to have it because we need enough power to get across. And so what got that dude beat at a small weight? We need to know it. We need to be open-minded and listen to it. But at the same time, we got to keep our mindset on what our end goal is.
All right, so it looks like we've got basically one last question. Excellent questions, and thank you all so much for tuning in and watching this. I mean, this has been, we've gone almost 2 hours. This is the longest one that we've ever done, and that time has flown by. And we've still got over 80 people tuning in and watching live, which is just amazing. And so, again, to Brad's point, that tells us that there's room out there for folks that want to learn and want to improve, and that's what our job is to do. It's not so much to sell you feed, it's to help you reach your goal. I mean, our job, yes, it obviously revolves around selling feed, but if you're not reaching your goals, there's probably a reason for that, and we want to be able to, again, help you control what you can control, and hopefully you can do that in some way with our feed products. So if you're not a Sunglo customer, man, we'd love to have your business, and if you are, we really appreciate it so much. And we'll take this one last question here from Alex on when do you start feeding Smorfil? Because this is a product that I know, Brandon, that you absolutely love.
Yeah, honestly, the long and short of it is really whenever. I mean, it's not a product that you're going to get upside down on. It's a very basic product. If you are using rolled oats in your regular feeding regimen today, Smorfil can be a 1-for-1 replacement. So it's not necessarily like there's a magical time to start this or not. I can tell you that in any time, if you've got a picky eater, this would be the first product that I would go to increase intake, but yet not change the diet drastically. This one's going to be a basic product to help with gut health and digestibility for the most part. The real big thing is the palatability and appetite enhancer in it. That's honestly just next level in terms of feed intake and at times stress. And so anytime that you have something picky, you don't want to go in there and change up a bunch of things or add a half a pound of sumo or something else that's sweet that'll get you some short-term gain, but sometimes it puts you a week behind the 8 ball, and sometimes you just need to get their intake to increase. And this is one that's pretty basic for the belly. It's really good from a like I say, a gut health and digestibility standpoint. Palatability is extremely good. So if you do not have a high quality rolled oat source that you have a lot of faith in, then I would say the Smorfil product is good from the start. I work with people that mix it in their baby pig rations when they do some of our starter type ground feeds on farm, to do it that way all the way through all the big hog feed that they mix. Not saying you have to do that. The cost difference on a bag of rolled oats and a bag of Smorfil is basically a moot point at the end of the day. In terms of cost on a per ton basis. So if it's strictly from that standpoint, I don't think there's a major reason not to. Nutritionally, there's quite a bit of similarity there you do have a little more fiber in Smorfil, which is not going to hurt in terms of body shape and forerib shape and those kind of things, which what we typically do on Smorfil, if we're not just trying to increase intake, if we're really trying to go in there and get a little more forerib or just feed one's body and not peel flesh, not add muscle, then this is a product that we'll go to the last 2 to 3 weeks before a show, and we'll maybe feed anywhere from 1 pound to 2 pounds of Smorfil a day to just increase some forerib shape and do things from that standpoint. But there is nothing in there that would take away from you starting it early or feeding it towards the end. So I know that's kind of a long ways to get there, but there's really no negative to going too early from that standpoint, other than making sure you don't run out when you go to the show. You want to make sure you have that on hand.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is definitely one of those that, sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say that this is definitely one of those products that no matter the show that you're going to, you better have it, and it better be fresh, and you better make sure that you got it under lock and key, because your buddies are going to be running over to you trying to dip some out for themselves as well.
Yeah, I would tell you this. I think pigs that eat are fun to feed. I mean, it's just that simple. I would much rather be in the situation where I know I've got something where my pigs are going to eat and drink, rather than being in the panic mode of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? If you get there, just try to find somebody that's got some of this. And I think that on that same note, I want if you pick up anything from this video, I would tell you, we've kind of mentioned it in one of the other ones. I love the forums and stuff, but when my child doesn't eat, not to make a comparison of my kiddo and my pig, but at times I feel like we
what you're going to
better, but I'm going to. But don't worry, they're asleep. When my child doesn't eat, I don't offer him cake. I try to figure out what's wrong with him. If he's sick, I start at something very basic. I say, "What's going on, my man?" If every time he didn't want to eat something, he tried, I offered him ice cream. Trust me, my man's going to be eating ice cream, and I'd probably do the same thing. What's great about this is you're not forcing them to eat something that's not nutritionally bad. You're actually resetting and helping their stomachs and you're getting their gut right with proper fiber. And sometimes, as weird as this sounds, pigs that eat continue to eat. And so when they go off feed, if they have a feed outage for some reason, you've kind of got to get that microflora and that gut rolling back. And that Smorfil product, I would take it serious in that regard. I'm not talking about it will get one eating and get them kind of back going. And like I said, I hope you guys don't have that problem where the pigs aren't eating when you get to the show. But I think if they do have some kind of a feed outage where they slow down, give them time and then come back and offer them some Smorfil. And I bet they get to picking at it and get to eating it, and we'll get them back rolling again.
Yeah, excellent points. I mean, again, this is a product too that contains probiotics. I mean, probiotics are so, mainstream culture right now, not only on the livestock side, but in the human side. And again, a pig's gut and a human's gut are very similar. And, as we constantly talk about taking care of ourselves better, we want to make sure that we're taking care of our livestock good as well. So, let's, we pretty much, yeah, okay. So we'll answer John's question here. This will be the last one that we're going to take tonight. Again, we're over 2 hours, and we thank everybody for coming in. Came back from our local show last weekend, and he's coming off feet a little. Got our county coming up on Sunday, and our weight is falling off. What can we do for John here?
John, the first thing I'm telling you is I'm coming back. I'm very simple. The first thing I'm doing is I'm probably temping that animal, right? I want to make sure that I'm not just I'm making sure it's not a feed problem, right? He just got exposed to a new situation, a lot of pigs. Now I come home and he's off feed. Once again, I go back to the kid analogy a little bit where I want to know what's going on. The first thing I'm going to do is temp him to see if we have some kind of a problem that needs treated. If he temps fine, I'm to me, I'm trying to also think about, did I just sit there and water that pig the whole time and train him to drink something? And I think that's a lot. If we get him to drink and drink and drink, like Nathan was talking earlier, I think it was about milking that animal, basically getting it to drink a lot of liquids. And then you might have to offer him that kind of stuff when you're that. Basically, even though you came home, if you put that pig in a show mentality where he's drinking a lot of his meal, you might have to continue to do that, and that might be the way to get him started back going, is to kind of offer some of that stuff. And that's probably a really good instance where maybe I'm putting a little bit of game on in water and getting him to drink it again to kind of get him rolling. But even in that situation, if I come back and he's not eating, I'm starting with something like a s'more fill. But remember, guys, we're not feeding something that's going to get him healthy. The first thing you can do, and I mean get on it quick, is make sure that he's healthy and make sure that there's not something that needs treated.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good or bad the feed is. If that animal's not healthy, it does not matter what's in that sack of feed.
And I'd say check stool and everything too. I mean, there's a lot of times where, if you've got to travel long distance or whatever, and your water intake or whatever is not as high, your feed intake was a little low at sometimes. If you change the rate at which things come in and go out, you can get some negative effect on some things. So just make sure everything's going the right way from that standpoint as well, on top of your health also.
I think all of our wives would say the same thing. It's like, drink more water. I've seen that thing where it says arm falls off, wife, drink more water. And so I think like getting that pig back in, and I'll tell you, it's weird. We get our pigs in such a regimen where I've got little kids. And so we set up our barn very simply where we can kind of get them into the wash rack pretty easy, get them out of the wash rack. And, you'd be surprised those pigs will get almost trained where they only use the bathroom in the wash rack. And so like Brandon said, I have these aha moments where I go, oh my gosh, that's a very, very hard stool. And I've got to get him out and exercise him, get him over into the wash rack and kind of reset his body to kind of process food again. Because, you really just shocked that animal. I mean, you had him in that barn for a certain amount of time. And if you just took him to that one local show, I mean, I promise you, and from his routine of just his bowel routine, you disrupted that. And it's definitely something you got to get him back in the groove of that. And man, water, and I say it at the house, I say it at the show. This is better right here and more important than anything we sell. And so you make sure you get it in them and keep it in them, guys.
And at the end of the day, check with your vet if you're having any major issues. I mean, that's, when it comes to that side of it, I mean, we can do a lot of cowboy math on the side of things and get pretty good on some stuff, but your vets, that's what they went to school for and studied, and those kind of things, put a lot of faith in there. There may be a lot of people in that area coming back with something very similar too. I mean, a lot of times I know in some of the paths that we travel, a lot of us go to the same show and those kind of things, you'll come back and you'll hear a similar story from, a lot of people. We're having these symptoms or we're doing this. So, that's what they're there for. That's like having somebody you don't want to play guess and check with your kids on everything too. And sometimes it's easier to get their prognosis and try one thing rather than doing 3 or 4 things and then getting their gut messed up. Because if you do that, you're going to battle that for another week or 2. So definitely reach out on that side as well.
Yeah, great question, and something that we've all battled, right? I mean, this is if you show long enough, this is something that's going to happen. So, just to summarize all that, we're shocking their gut, right? So, I mean, it could be just something as simple as that too. So, yeah, keep it up. Again, thank you guys all so much for tuning in. I mean, this has been an awesome evening. All of these videos are cataloged on our YouTube channel, and I've put that up in there in the link in the comments. And this is also being recorded, so you can come back and you can watch this as many times as you want. We thank you so much for tuning in. This is gonna, as soon as I hit stop, you'll be able to tune back in and watch it, and maybe come back, watch it again, take some notes. There's probably something that you missed. I know there's stuff that I missed, I guarantee it. But again, we thank you for your business, and we appreciate you tuning in, and best of luck. I mean, I know this is a stressful time for everybody. I hope you're staying healthy and you're staying in good spirits as things are progressing. And we appreciate your business so much. And so on behalf of the rest of the Sunglo crew, this is Nathan Day alongside Brandon Yanis and Brad Mabry, and we thank you so much for tuning in.
See you guys.
Thank you.